Watch this.
If you have a strongly held belief in anything, you don't have to see the person that comes in.
Are religious beliefs keeping counselors from helping patients? Some lawmakers think they should be able to, but an actual mental health professional says that would actually be unethical. Are the lambs still crying, Clarice? Oh yeah, we're talking cannibalism and defining domestic terrorism. Or are we? There's a lot more to unpack from this week at the State House. Okay, last question. Did you know today is the first day of Women's History Month? So we're taking it back to when we highlighted some of Idaho's iconic women in government. Idaho's Terrorist Control Act remains intact. For the second time this session and the third session in a row, a bill to define domestic terrorism was back in front of lawmakers. Sponsors call it simply a due process bill. So quick backstory. Senate Bill 1220 was introduced in January and passed the Senate. It was supposed to define domestic terrorism, which isn't included in the 1987 statute. Well, 1220 wanted to link domestic terrorism as something done in cooperation with a foreign terrorist organization, something we talked about 2 weeks ago with the author of Idaho's original Terrorist Control Act. That would be former State Attorney General Jim Jones.
Adding the requirement that the prosecutor prove that this was done in conjunction with one of those 70 organizations. Those guys are not going to support a bombing here in Boise. And that makes it, you can't get a conviction.
Okay, so that was 2 weeks ago when 1220 was given a hearing in the House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. But that day, the committee chair decided they were going to carry the bill into a second day of debate. It wasn't finished yet. And 1220 has been hanging around since. That is until today, when it was set aside in favor of an updated version. That would be House Bill 623. This one would return the civil disorder definition, which was scratched from the original Senate bill. But the same issues remained for those who had a problem with the previous bill. This idea that domestic terrorism has to be linked to a foreign terrorist organization. As Democratic Representative Chris Mathias pointed out, what appears to be a fundamental misunderstanding of terrorism. This isn't a disagreement with your school board. It isn't religious, it isn't where you come from, or even the type of violence committed.
Terrorism is a type of violence designed to disrupt the democratic process, and it puts all of us in jeopardy. So, Mr. Chairman, for example, if I commit a battery on you, that's battery, but if I commit a battery on you to disrupt this proceeding, that jeopardizes all of our well-being as Americans in a free society. And so the idea that we would require someone who wanted to do that to send an email to Hamas first, it makes no sense to me.
Not even sure they're answering their emails. A roll call vote ended in a tie, by the way. 8 in favor, 8 against, meaning it did not pass. 5 Republicans voted no on this bill. So therefore, the bill is dead. 1220, the previous bill, that was actually held in committee earlier in the hearing. So in order to, Frankenstein that bill and bring it back alive, it would need a 2/3 vote by the committee. And given that vote, who knows if that's going to happen.
Can you tell us the 3 secret ingredients that might be found in this amazing sausage that you made for us today?
The 3 secret ingredients that might be found in this sausage are fish liver, human flesh, or shark.
Okay, sticking with the House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee, because that 12-second clip from a television show about pulling pranks on people is the reason we had a public hearing this afternoon about amending Idaho's cannibalism law and why it is now heading to the House floor. Republican Representative Heather Scott saw that clip on social media and decided we needed to address this in Idaho because she was worried about cannibalism being normalized. We already have a ban on cannibalism on the books because of another hoax more than 30 years ago. The unfounded satanic panic in the 80s prompted lawmakers to make sure that kind of stuff was outlawed here. So Representative Scott, she just wants to expand the definition of cannibalism to include anyone who willfully provides the flesh or blood of a human being to another person to ingest without that person knowing. That's what she wants to do. Well, if that happens, they would also be guilty of cannibalism. So to back up her claims of normalizing from a few weeks ago, Representative Scott read from a February 14th article in The New Scientist.
Ethically, cannibalism poses fewer issues than you may imagine. If a body can be bequeathed and consent in medical science, why can't it be left to feed the hungry? And while we might think of that as super gross, there are people that are thinking like that in society. And I think it's a good protection to put in the law to preempt what might be coming.
Okay, so that article in The New Scientist was written to point out researchers have uncovered evidence that our ancestors ate each other surprisingly often. Not always as a snack, but often as a funeral ritual to honor their dead. And Representative Scott read two sentences from it. The part of the article Representative Scott did not share was a couple of paragraphs down. And it said, like it or not, cannibalism is an important part of our story. This isn't to say that we should change our attitudes toward it, but understanding its deep roots might shift our perspective on the few cultures that still practice it today, albeit only occasionally. It's not to say we should change our attitudes about it. It's the part she left out. Nobody testified against the bill today, and nobody voted against it. It sailed on through to the House floor.
I want everybody here to imagine spending 18 months tied up in a court and spending $20,000 on legal fees because of a blog post you wrote.
Well, imagine spending a fraction of that time looking up a bill template online to make sure online trolls can continue being online trolls, and then having it end in minutes on the Senate floor. That's exactly what happened with Republican Senator Brian Lenny's anti-SLAPP bill. And we've covered this strategic lawsuit against public participation topic before a couple of times. And it's safe to say this bill stemmed from a couple of lawsuits we first covered 2 years ago. Cliff Notes version, former Republican State Representative Chad Christensen filed a defamation lawsuit in 2021 against activist Gregory Graff. Graff countersued, but included Second Amendment Alliance founder Greg Pruitt and former Idaho Freedom Foundation Vice President Dustin Hurst as defendants for what was said and shared in their online feud. Christensen's lawsuit was dismissed, and Graff eventually withdrew his counterclaim after a judge called him a limited public figure. So that's what happened. So when the dust finally settled in this legal scuffle last November, Hurst told us Idaho needs an anti-SLAPP law to stop bullies from using the legal system to silence their foes. Well, that's when Senator Lenny stepped in. He brought forth Senate Bill 1325, what he called a free speech protection bill to stop people from filing a lawsuit to silence or intimidate a political opponent. The bill would allow a judge to throw out such a claim early in the legal process rather than later after spending thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, as you heard him say. Lenny made it clear Idaho is one of just 18 states without such protection, and his bill squeezed through a Senate committee on Tuesday. But when it hit the Senate floor yesterday evening, Representative Lenny introduced it like this.
I'm not a lawyer, but I didn't come up with this idea or come up with this bill. This is a Uniform Law Commission bill that hundreds of lawyers spent about 3 years on before they released it as a model bill.
It's kind of like looking up how to rewire your kitchen on YouTube, right? Okay, that's just one of the issues at least one senator had with it.
It's interesting over the many years that I've been in this body that there's been a lot of resistance to the Uniform Law Commission. So to see that the Uniform Law Commission as model legislation is being brought as the perfect example in this case, I think we've come full circle.
We have come full circle. Senator Lee added Idaho needs an Idaho solution, not another copied and pasted proposal. But Senator Lee wasn't the only one to clap back at this anti-SLAPP bill.
But I am concerned about some public figures who support this concept, this bill, have gone out on social media and gone after others who testified in the committee the same day. So it leads me to have concern about whether there's something in this bill that's not true, that could be a problem, because it evidently is not stopping some of those who are real bold going out after others.
Senator Ricks appeared to be calling out Dustin Hurst in his debate against the bill, basically saying, we don't have an anti-SLAPP law now, and that isn't stopping online trolls from being online trolls. The bill failed 15-20.
The signs on the door may be behind on business, Because this real estate
Seen it all.
now serves to fix real people's real problems.
Any number of mental illnesses.
With counselor
We are licensed as helpers.
Sean Nixon.
Hold on, we're going to start over on that because we're going to do a story or follow a story we've kind of touched on already a couple of times, at least one time. The question is, should you start a policy or form a policy when there's already a code of ethics that covers something when it comes to counselors, let's say? Thursday, we told you about Senate Bill 1352 passing the Senate. It wants to give counselors and therapists the right to refuse service based on deeply held religious beliefs. Those in opposition say, at best, this bill goes against the industry's code of ethics, and at worst, it would legalize discrimination. And as Andrew Bartline learned, associations representing counselors and therapists, well, they never asked for this anyway.
The signs on the door may be behind on business. Because this real estate
Seen it all.
now serves to fix real people's real problems.
Any number of mental illnesses.
With counselor
We are licensed as helpers.
Sean Nixon.
How's this really impacting your life? Because we are building trust each and every session.
A trust Idaho lawmakers fear is forced on the provider.
No Idahoan should be required to check their moral or ethical principles at the door of their profession.
Which is just another way of saying counselors should legally be able to refuse service to people they disagree with.
It re-traumatizes them. We're not treating people's lifestyles. We're treating an illness.
These kinds of bills aren't new.
Started about 10 years ago.
They've popped up all over the country without a clear reason why it's now in the gem state.
This legislation wasn't asked for by the providers.
And just last session, it passed the House before stalling in the Senate. But it's the House this year that stands between the bill and Governor Brad Little.
The likelihood that it's going to pass is high.
In the name of religious freedom over industry standards, because a mismatch of morals does happen.
And our own ideas about how a person should live their life isn't really germane to the topic.
Counselors are told to seek help from others in the field to get more training to discuss the topic. Referring the client to another professional is a last resort because it comes with a cost.
They have to go through the whole process again of explaining their life.
Trust.
And they have to do this in a completely new environment, not knowing how this other counselor is going to react to them.
But supporters say victims are not the problem. This bill protects counselors from the morally indecent.
He really feels strongly that if he were only to have an affair on his wife, things in this life would be so much better. And he's looking for that counselor that he's working with to validate, to go along with those goals, and to create the outcome that he's trying to achieve.
That is far from it. Counseling gets this view that we're just a friend that's going to agree with us. And there's been many sessions where I've had clients and families leave upset with me because I pointed out the disassociation between thought and reality that they were having.
Sean says the reality of this bill is not about the morals inside his doors, but the people outside.
And a lot of these laws have been really focused on LGBTQI plus clientele.
This is about gay people.
Senator Ruckty said the same.
That's what we're really talking about.
And that's who this bill could really impact.
We are in a helping profession.
But no one wins when values lock doors.
Let's not have to deal with this. Like, see people and treat them like humans.
Sean says his biggest concern with the bill is the lack of a referral process. If a counselor has exhausted all options and truly cannot help a specific client with their specific issue, that counselor will refer the client to another professional. But they will also help the client with other manageable portions of treatment. So there's a transition period. There's not a dead space in between. This bill lets the counselor cut a client cold, no follow-up, no transition needed. And for people who are working through deep trauma, Sean says that can be a huge issue. It can emotionally destroy them in a sense, where it takes them 8 sessions to open up to you and whatever issue they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Whoa, it was too much for me, not talking to you again.
Right, that happens. I mean, the bite about that being like looking for somebody to warrant what you're doing, to give you acceptance and that kind of stuff, Is there any discussion here about whether any of these counselors were consulted when they crafted this bill? I know it's been around for a while.
Now what we've heard from Sean, he's involved in associations, organizations that oversee the profession. He says no.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Oh, we are not finished with what's happening at the State House. Here is your weekly legislative wrap.
The folks in District 30 have weighed in more heavily in favor of 447 and the school choice that it would represent. I feel like those against it might have a little higher level of intensity on it.
On Monday, we revisited House Bill 447, the parental choice tax credit bill. It's supposed to let parents choose the educational services that meet the needs of their individual children, and it would subsidize that choice by allowing parents to claim a tax credit up to $5,000 per student or $7,500 for kids with special needs. There's also a grant portion of the bill for lower-income families. House Bill 447 is still awaiting a hearing in the House Revenue and Taxation Committee.
This piece of legislation ensures that taxpayer dollars are not used to provide medical treatments and surgeries for the purpose of changing the appearance of a person's sex in a way that is not consistent with their biological sex.
On Tuesday, we told you about House Bill 668, which replaced House Bill 520 to keep public money from being used for gender transition. The new bill makes it clear this would apply to both minors and adults. And the exempted surgical operations or medical interventions would only apply when it was necessary for the health of that person, such as procedures to remedy ambiguous sexual characteristics. We also touched on Senate Bill 1365, creating a voluntary statewide next-of-kin database you can opt into when you get your driver's license. That way, law enforcement and county coroners would be able to use that next-of-kin information to get in contact with your family in case of emergency. On Wednesday, that bill was amended to make it clear this information would only be used by law enforcement. Then Thursday, the amended Senate Bill 1365 was filed for a full debate on the Senate floor.
We are maintaining our republic by protecting our election process.
House Bill 470 would give the Attorney General more powers to investigate illegal voting, which right now is the job of the Secretary of State.
None of the sponsors ever came and talked to us. It will be impossible for this group to do any of its work without working with us who are working in elections.
House Bill 470 headed to the House floor with a do-pass recommendation.
March 1st, they literally could come and take it all away, I guess. I don't know what they'll do.
Meanwhile, House Bill 570 protects historic distributors so when state-run liquor stores come into town, those small-town businesses don't have to stop selling. And the good news, the Star Merc liquor license has been extended through March, so they can keep selling their liquor while House Bill 570 keeps waiting for a full debate on the House floor. Well, today, March 1st, is the first day of Women's History Month. And as one of the first states to allow women to vote, that was back in 1896, before it was even a state, you can bet Idaho has had its fair share of women making their mark in politics. Back in 2020, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave all women access to the polls, the Idaho State Historical Society highlighted some of these Idaho women in today's 208 Redial.
I feel so inspired by the women that are in this room. One woman in particular is Permille French. She was the first woman elected to the State Superintendency of Public Instruction. She was originally from Idaho City, was educated there until about age 14 when she went to California, received a more formal education, and came back and really worked tirelessly to improve educational systems here in the state of Idaho. We have one photograph on exhibit that features the first 3 women legislators elected to the Idaho State House of Representatives in 1898. And what's remarkable about these 3 women is that they represented 3 of the 4 political parties that existed in the state of Idaho. The first woman who was appointed to the Idaho State Senate was Hattie Durr, and her work during the 1937-38 session followed in line with the work that her husband had done. She came into that appointment after Governor Brazilla Clark appointed her to fill the seat after her husband had passed. Many women have filled the position of state treasurer here in Idaho, but 2 women, mother-daughter, Marjorie and Ruth Moon, come to mind as remarkable women. Marjorie Moon was actually the longest-serving state treasurer at the time of her death in the 1980s. Nellie Klein Steenson was the first woman who was elected to the Idaho State Senate. She had also previously served in the Idaho House of Representatives. And I have a quote that I would like to share that she really understood the work that she was doing as a politician and that women were doing as politicians in Idaho. These women politicians may temporarily forsake the dust mop to wield a bigger broom, but all of them work hardest at being women in the best American tradition. They have found a bigger house to clean, and from the sheepish looks of the occasional legislator's face, bigger boys to stand in the corner.
All right, final minute of this show on a Friday. Let's get to as many text messages as we can to wrap up the week. This one from Stephanie about giving counselors an option of just not talking to clients based on religious beliefs. It seems certain legislators think the term validate means to agree with clients. To validate someone means to let them know their feelings are valid. Feelings are not right or wrong, good or bad, they just are. Counselors help people see what they might be missing, which helps clients grow. It's a well-put point there, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing that. I am to the point that I want to mute any report regarding the laws proposed by the Idaho legislature. Why in the world are they wasting my tax dollars to push ridiculous laws that will only cause a challenge by the courts? I am baffled, says Christine. Please pay attention. That's why we do these stories, so you know what's happening, what the people you elected to do are doing. What does any of this, take your pick with any bill that we've talked about, have to do with removing the grocery tax? Concerned citizen wants to know. Finally tonight, enough insanity. When are the legislators leaving town? Supposed to be March 22nd. We'll see if that happens. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week.